To configure data deduplication, the first thing we have to do is actually install the capability on the server. What you'll see by default, in Server Manager, if you go to File and Storage Services, and under your volumes, you'll see disks. It's always present in the list. You will see all the disks that show up. So I have my disk 0, that's the operating system drive. I have disk 3 and disk 4. Those are from the storage pool we created in an earlier lesson. But I'm going to click on disk 3 here. So disk 3, if I slide this over, has the E volume and the F volume on it. Where when I click on the E volume, you'll see configure data deduplication is in the list, but it's grayed out. That's because we have not yet installed data deduplication. So what I'm going to do is just go to Manage, Add Roles and Features in Server Manager. And in our wizard, we'll just click Next on the Before You Begin. Install type, role-based. That's my local server I'm on right now. So we'll go Next. Under File and Storage Services, if we expand File and iSCSI Services, data deduplication is in the list. So I'll just choose that. And we will accept the defaults for everything else in the wizard. We're not changing any other settings. So next on Features, and we will install. That was successful. So I'm going to click Close here. Now I'm going to refresh this page by clicking this little refresh icon here. And that'll take just a moment. You'll see a little blue bar pulse across until it's done. And it looks to be done. So now I'm still on my here, File and Storage Services, Disks. I'm on Disk 3. When I right click the E volume now, I can select Configure Data Deduplication. Now, one thing to keep in mind before we configure this, you can never configure data deduplication on the operating system disk. So if you were to go to your C drive, this will forever be grayed out, configure data deduplication, so you would have to have like a separate volume to actually do that. Could never do it on the C drive. When I go back to my E drive, I'm going to select Configure Data Deduplication. It is disabled by default. So once you install it, it's always disabled on every volume. You have to go volume by volume and enable this. When I enable it, it'll ask why we want to enable it. Like, what's your purpose for doing this? Are you doing this for a general purpose file server? That's what we'll actually select. Are you using some type of virtual desktop infrastructure where you stream Windows 10 out to clients on the network? That's not extremely common. Is this a backup server? Are you using like a virtual machine as a backup server, and are you trying to deduplicate backups? By far the most common is actually the general purpose file server. No matter what you select here, the only thing that changes will be the default settings. Like if I click virtual desktop, you'll see it has default file extensions to exclude. It adds bin, a bunch of other extensions show up here. If I choose general purpose file server, it has this EDB and this JRS. So whatever you choose, it just kind of helps you out by automatically defining some of the most common settings you would want. Well, the way this is set up right now, it will deduplicate files older than 3 days. I could exclude any file extensions I don't want to be deduplicated. These two are defined by default. There are files you'll see associated with databases, the EDB and JRS. You may not want like temp files to be, so very common you'll see .temp or .tmp files show up here. I could also exclude folders. So on the E drive, if I had some folder I did not want to be deduplicated, you could simply add, and you could go through the E drive and you could select the folder. Now, we didn't create any folders on the E drive, so I'm going to create one now, and I'm just going to call it Corp Data. If for some reason I don't want that to be deduplicated, I can just select that folder and deduplication would never look at that folder. At a minimum, that's all you have to do. Now, some things to keep in mind. What you don't want to have happen. You don't want your server to deduplicate so frequent that it is hung in this like endless loop of deduplicating. That is the significance of only deduplicating files older than 3 days. Now, some environments will set that to be much longer. But imagine if you have a terabyte of data on this file server. Every day, some data on this server would change. And you would have some data that changes maybe multiple times a day, like a spreadsheet that is edited on a very regular basis. If it's modified that often, you really don't want to use the resources to keep deduplicating it. So, to kind of slow down the resource consumption of this, I can say I only want to deduplicate files that are kind of in a constant state. They're not changing, on a daily basis. 7 days is actually pretty common for this as well. Just depends on your needs, but generally we'll never have it be less than 3. You could stop right now and click OK, and it's going to deduplicate any file older than 3 days that's not excluded, or if it's not in that directory. But what's more important than that, the set dedup schedule. When I choose that, you have 2 options really. Enable background optimization. This runs right now 24 hours a day. Regularly run data dedup at a low priority and pause data dedup when the system is busy to minimize the impact on system performance. So what I don't want to have happen is I don't want the server to run in a degraded state and be slow for my users because deduplication is actually running. So it runs at a low priority only when sufficient resources exist. Now let's say this is deduplicating and it is 8 a.m. Users show up to work. Users start connecting to data on the server gets busier. What dedup can do is completely pause itself while this server is being heavily accessed to make sure it does not degrade performance. Once users disconnect, more resources are available, it'll then resume the deduplication process. So it just runs slow in the background, does not consume a lot of resources. Now let's say your company works 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., only a few people actually work, so you're not concerned about performance after 5 p.m. What you can do is enable throughput optimization for those times. So throughput optimization, instead of running at a low priority, it will run at a normal priority. Now, almost all applications and programs run at a normal priority. So it'll run like any other resource on your system, and it will consume whatever memory, processor resources it actually needs. So this may very well degrade performance. So you'd want this to run when you know the server is not going to be very busy doing anything else. Well, what I can do is say I want this to run. We'll clear some of these days. I want this to run starting, say, Monday night, or Monday afternoon, we should say, at 5 p.m. So Monday evening at 5 p.m., I want this to run for several hours. We'll say 14. If my math is correct, if this starts at 5 p.m. Monday, then it will run at a throughput optimized level until 7 a.m. the next morning. Maybe users start showing up around 7 or shortly after to get ready for the 8 o'clock work hour. So at 7 a.m., I wanted to go back to just being background optimization. The reason we have 2 schedules here is really for weekday, and the other is more of a weekend schedule. So like with this schedule, I could say, we just clear some of these days. I could say I want this to run Friday at 5 p.m. Let me slide that up a bit. But we want it to run for 24 hours. I could then say for Saturday, I want it to run for another 24 hours. So you could have a schedule where this runs on the weekend. for different hours than it would run during the week. That's why they give us two schedules that we can actually use. Now, you could even disable background optimization. So it only runs after 5 p.m. based on these two schedules. That's an option. Extremely rare anyone would do that because this is so efficient running at a low priority that it would not degrade performance of your users. So pretty fascinating overall. But I can just click OK for that schedule and our schedule is now set. It would start deduplicating the E volume, anything older than 3 days, background, then that throughput optimization based on the schedule we defined. It's another one of those things that is more planning because the configuration itself is not that extensive. But we'll just OK that, and we are now running deduplication. Something else to consider. I'm thinking about enabling data deduplication, but I'm not sure if I would really benefit from it. So what we can do is analyze a drive first to see how much space you would save, because what I don't want to do is deduplicate terabytes and terabytes of data to then discover I only have minimal savings. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy some data from my server and I'm going to put it on the F drive. So I'm going to go to this PC and on the F drive here, I'm just going to paste a folder. Now this folder is 42.6 megs in size. Well, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it several times in this location, just over and over and over. Then I want to just highlight all of it, just generating data to see how this would actually look for us. That is, I'm sure, more than enough. What I'm going to do now is pull up PowerShell. And in PowerShell, I'm going to run this command ddp eval, which stands for data deduplication evaluation. This is part of the data deduplication service. So once we install that, this was just part of that. If you do not have data dedupe installed, you cannot run this command. It'll just give you an error message. But I'm going to run ddp eval f : for the F drive and hit enter. And that's going to take a few minutes and it's going to evaluate that drive. So now that that's done, I can see the evaluated folder size is 4.99 gigabytes. Okay, I'm just going to say 5 gigs. If I deduplicate this drive, it goes from 5 gigs to 14.47 megabytes. So I'm using 4.99 gigs now. I will save 4.98 gigs, which is a space savings of 99%. Now, I copied the same files like over and over and over, but even if you didn't do that, you won't get 99%. But very commonly, you'll get 70, 80% space savings for actual drives with different types of data on it. What's great about this tool is you know what you'll get before you even do it. If for some reason you had very little duplicate data, and this came back and said you are only saving like 15%, probably not worth your time to consume those resources. So just let you know if it's even advisable that you attempt to do this. So very useful tool, the DDP eval is.